Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of run-down no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
My Bigfoot sightings began in 1968. My name is Dale Edward Reise. I was approximately 10 years old when the first time I had my experience. It started out with me walking down the road, down on Dalton Road, which merged to Galarno, which was all bush area off this corner. My first time that I even knew that it was there was the odor that it produced, which I found was very hard to breathe in. And I noticed when I stepped forward or stepped back in a certain area that the smell remained in just one area. So that made me curious, but I kind of continued on. A couple days after that, I was walking down the same road, and it started throwing stuff out of the bush in front of me, just basically stopped me from going any further. At the time that it was throwing stuff out of the bush in front of me, it chucked a fairly large chunk of wood, which landed on the road in front of a car, which the guy slammed on his brakes and asked me what was going on. And I told him that it came from in the bush, and he grabbed the chunk of wood and went rushing into the bush, I guess thinking it was a kid throwing this stuff. When he came back out, about 2 or 3 minutes later, he was white as a ghost. He didn't have the wood with him anymore. And he never said a word. He just jumped in the car and left. And that was it. I never seen the guy again. I was curious as to why it was throwing stuff to stop me from going any further. But again, I continued on my way. A couple days later, I'm walking down the road, same road, Dalton Road, and heading in to go and see my buddies. I had an apple in my hand. I was munching on an apple, and I noticed a hand sticking out of the bush. Now, at the time, I didn't understand what it was all about, and I turned around and I walked up to the hand, and I put the apple in there, but it dumped the apple out and still had its hand open and cupped. So, like a kid, I was poking my finger in there, and it pulled its hand back in, and I went, okay, and I cupped my hand, and it pulled its hand out again and touched my palm with its finger. I thought, well, isn't that cool? That's rather neat. Now, at the time, I didn't realize that we were submitting to each other. So I would go down this road every day, go and see my friends, and at one end of where the two roads junction, the bush opened up and you could see into the back. Well, from there on, I started seeing the Sasquatch, which was approximately 7 foot tall. It was a female, had black hair, I could tell it was a female because you could see the breasts. The face, it was almost totally hair covered except for around the eyes and around the nose and the mouth. She was huge, and every day I would see it as I walked by, and I would wave to it, hello, hello. And of course, everybody in the neighborhood knew it was there because it would go into their gardens, it would raid their gardens, their trees. But nobody seemed to care because it did no harm to nothing or nobody. So the whole neighborhood in that area knew that it was there. I knew it was there. People all around knew it was there. We seemed to understand that it being there was no threat to anybody because it just seemed to be wanting to eat and sleep in that one area. So one day, I'm walking along the road, and this dog, it was a German Shepherd, I guess, come running at me, and I'm going by this open spot in the bush. Now, little did I know that the female had been watching me every day, coming by, and she'd been watching that day too, and the dog came running at me, and it went into an attack mode. It was growling, snarling, and it started backing me towards the bush. Well, when the dog did this, I could hear something crunching in behind me, but I had my eyes focused on the dog. And the Sasquatch came up right in behind me. I mean, she was no more than a foot away in behind me. And while the dog was still snarling and snapping at me, she let out a huge bellowing scream. I mean, this thing went through you. I had to squat down to avoid feeling all that scream coming through. Well, that dog tuck-tailed and ran. And I mean, he went down. I learned that dog lived about a block and a half down the road. So when the dog took off and I turned around and I looked at the Sasquatch and she just kind of looked at me, I wrapped my arms around her thick thigh and gave her a hug saying, thank you for saving my skin. She just kind of shrugged her shoulders and walked back into the bush. Well, the owner of the dog turned around and came out, about an hour after that, because I was still hanging around that area. And he asked me what happened, because his dog was so frightened. He heard his dog yelping all the way from the area that I was in. Because his dog had turned around and went racing into the house and went hiding underneath his bed. And it was very, very frightened of the Sasquatch that had screamed at it. I guess everybody in the neighborhood heard the scream, so most people were pretty curious about that. Well, I explained to the guy what had happened and about his dog running loose and coming at me. I explained everything to him. He went back in a huff, and later on I learned that it took about a week for that dog to even poke its head outside, to even go to the bathroom. It was so afraid. And at the time that all this happened, I didn't know that there was a little old lady across the street, an old Polish woman, had seen the whole thing. So right after the incident had happened, she had stepped outside, and I crossed the road and went over to her, and I kind of looked at her and I said, did you see what happened? She said, yes. So so nobody can say I was lying about it. She said, no, I watched the whole thing. So that was the very first time that I came along and met with the Sasquatch. Now, later on in years, I seen another one, but this one was, I guess about 13 or 14 years old. He was skinny, gangly, about 6 foot, maybe a little bit shorter. This was near an elementary school in a totally different area. Now, a bunch of kids had seen him before that. He had been coming out of this bush area where a creek was going through, and we all gathered around there to see. It came out of the bush. I figure it was a really young one because it was attracted to all the kids that were in the area. So it was kind of neat seeing this thing almost every day until somebody said something to an adult who came out and went home, got his rifle, came right back down into that area and went after the Sasquatch. We don't think he got it. I think it got away because he came out and said, well, it won't be coming back now, because we heard the gunfire. And of course, he got in trouble for the law for shooting a gun off near the elementary school, no matter what it was. That was the second time I seen one. Then later on, as I started going on in my youth and we started driving up and down up the hill to the lakes, we started seeing them, in open slash areas crossing over. We went up to this one lake where we would camp. We had one coming around the camp all the time. And again, the smell was the big thing. You could smell it, but you couldn't see it because it was always hiding in the bush. Now, the only reason I knew it was around there was when I went and looked to investigate. I watched it run out of the bush, cross the highway, crawl up a small rock face, and disappear into the forest on the other side, which surprised me. We kept hearing hollers in the different mountains as Sasquatch were trying to communicate to each other all the time in that area. Then later on again, years passed, I started spacing in this one area in the Nimkish Valley. Now, we kind of knew that they were in this particular patch that I had to space, which is for every tree that's around, there's a 12-foot ring of trees that are cut down around one tree that's left, and that's what they wanted for spacing. So for every 12 feet, you left a tree. Well, I'm spacing in this area. I spotted a big X of two trees that were not rooted in the ground. They were totally broke off and left in a big X. Of course, I had to take that down. I started seeing them the further in I cut. I was in a good, I would say about a good half mile into the bush when I started seeing them, and they would walk the same length I was walking up to where I'd last cut, and they would follow me and then disappear into the woods. Well, at one point, I found that the way I was dropping my trees into little squares, so they were approximately 2.5, 3 feet tall, with trees on top of trees in squares. There were acres of them. They started using them for leaving their young in there. I noticed because I would spot the odd one here and there in a square, and I knew it wasn't a bear. I knew it wasn't a deer. I know what forest animals would do this. So I started walking along because I always cut a path along where I was cutting, so we got easy access in and out in case of emergencies. And I'm walking along this one path going in, and I started in about 7 o'clock in the morning heading in, so it was about 8:30 in the morning. I spotted this really young Sasquatch laying in this one square right along my trail. And I looked down at it, and when it turned around and looked at me, you could see the brown eyes it had just looking at you like, who are you kind of thing. And I noticed out of the corner of my eye that I spotted a cougar coming along. And I stopped, and I was watching the cougar. I had 1 foot in the square where the little baby was, so everything was fine with that. I didn't step on it. And I watched this cougar as it started coming. I guess it caught the scent of the young, and it started coming closer and closer and closer. So I went into a defensive crouch. And as for weaponry, all I had were files on me for my saw. So I had one of those in my hand. And I started yelling and screaming at the cougar till it stopped moving. Now, this cougar was approximately 20 feet away from me. So I know it was probably going after the young that was down at my feet. But I stayed there, and I started throwing stuff at it, and I kept screaming and yelling at it for a good 10 minutes before the mother come running out of the bush, and she just threw a huge chunk of wood, and it whizzed on by my head, aimed straight at the cougar, hit the cougar screamed, she bellowed at the same time, the cougar turned around, took right off. Now, when she stopped, she was approximately 3 feet behind me. So, and she was a good 7-footer. Had light brown hair. Her skin was all gray, except for her cheeks, which were hair on her cheeks, on her upper lip, on her chin had hair, hair on her head. All around her face, there was like from the forehead, around the cheeks, down around the nose, to the lips, basically was bare skin, gray skin. At that point, I kind of looked her straight in the eye, and she looked at me, and I kind of lifted the little baby Sasquatch up, and I had it in one eye, said I was protecting it from the cougar. She kind of understood, so when I handed her the baby, she took the baby, and then she turned around and put her hand on my chest very gently, and she held it there for a good 10, 15 minutes. Now, I'm not sure what she was doing, I guess thanking me in some way for doing what I did for her young and protecting them, which was a unique experience. For me, it made me feel quite proud that I had gotten this kind of attention from her, and it surprised me. Now, I was about 35 years old when this happened, so I had been seeing Sasquatch throughout my youth, since I was a kid, into my adulthood. I've seen them in logging camps where we were on the mainland at Phillips Arm. Now, I was approximately 36, 37 years old. We were working in this one valley that was 10 miles long. We were still using chokers and old wood spars, and we were pulling these things up, the logs out by wooden spar. Well, we heard the thing screaming the first time we heard it, and that had to have been, God, miles away, this thing, because his voice would reverberate through the valley. And it kept getting louder and louder as it kept walking towards us. Now, as it got louder and louder, it got louder than the machines that were working. So everybody shut the machines down, and we could hear it. Now, up on the far bank from where we were working, there was a huge 20-foot bank, and there was a 6-foot ditch in there. Now, that was because they cleared all the trees, and that was for the runoff for the rain. It gave the rain some place to go, so it didn't take the hillside down. Well, as it come out of the forest, it walked into the ditch. Now, from that ditch, being 6 foot, you could still see 4 feet of this thing above the ditch. And it was tossing logs that would take 6 men to even try and lift to get it out of the ditch. It was tossing them like they were just sticks. And it walked along, still hollering, stopped every once in a while, looked down at us, turned, kept on going. And it walked almost the full length of this ditch before it went up and on to the other side. One of the machine operators and myself, we went scrambling up the slope as it was walking through the ditch, and we hopped into the ditch ourselves, and we watched it come toward us, look at us, and then walk up out of the ditch and down into the other side of the valley that ran on the other side of the ditch and disappeared. Now, we were totally in shock when we seen this, but we admitted we seen it. Everybody around there that worked on that crew, and there was 13 of us working on that crew, we all seen it, but we were told to kind of close our mouths about it because the forestry didn't want us getting word out that this is what's been happening in that area. Now, this is the same area that the Ottman incident happened. This is the exact same area. So we weren't surprised to hear it. And in camp, we had heard the hollerings of it way up in the mountains. So that was another incident. Later on, now, I turned around and we kept seeing them here in town. There were sightings in town, lots of people in town here. It got to be fairly normal to actually know that they were around here, being as where we are on Vancouver Island, in Canada, British Columbia. Most scientists know this island as Ape Island, and that's because of the Sasquatch. We've had sightings up and down this island from Victoria, huge city, the surrounding towns, to all the way up to the northern tip of the island. There have been Sasquatch sightings. Now, on this island that we live, it's only the eastern side that actually has really got any kind of populace. The rest of the island is wild, which would give credence to a fairly good-sized population. Now, up in some of the areas I've gone to, which is northwest of the island in a town called Gold River, there have been numerous sightings up there, and I've had numerous incidences up there. I go to a lot of the secluded lakes up there, and I find that the Sasquatch seem to come around whenever I'm out there. Once they realize that I'm there, they come around. They stop being afraid of me and come out to the open all the time when I'm out there. The last time that I seen any kind of a sighting, which would have been 2 years ago with my girlfriend, we were up in the Gold River area, up along the Heber River, and we were walking along this road, and we took a little side road which wound up along the power lines, and there were rock bluffs and all kinds of stuff, heavy forest on the other side of where the road ended. Well, from there, I stood looking I noticed, standing there, I noticed heads moving in the forest in this one area where there was a rock ledge. And you could see the heads clearly as they were walking through. Now, all I could see at that point was the tops of their heads, the conical heads. So as they were walking through, I don't know why they stopped, but one of them turned around and crawled up on the rock face onto this ledge and stood there. Now, this thing was massive. I would guess it to be around 10 feet tall, dark-haired, very muscular, had long hair all over it, except for around the eyes, the nose, around the mouth, which had gray skin. I've had more numerous sightings since, but these are just many, many, many sightings that I've always had. And like I said, they never seem to hide from me. They always come out to the open. I guess they've gotten to the point where I've been called a Sasquatch magnet. I've seen them so many times, and when I've had people with me, they've seen them as well. So people tend to call me a magnet towards them, which make me chuckle. But I've always approached them with a very calmness in me. I've never been afraid of them. I've always been dead calm, so they seem to understand that I would do nothing to harm them. And the ones we have on this island are basically what you would call the paddy Sasquatch, seen in California and all along there. They're huge. They're actually they're not very aggressive unless you do something to make them aggressive. Most times they're very gentle. They're very gentle creatures. I've never had one try and hurt me at all. I've had them protect me more numerous times than I care to think about. I've had many encounters with them where I've been able to get within 1.5 feet of them, able to touch them. They were able to touch me. These are things that have happened throughout my life. Now I'm 66. I plan on doing more bush runs, just into areas I know where there's clans of them. Over the years, I've been able to turn around and befriend at least 3 other clans in different areas. And it's quite an experience. But I've always approached them with a dead calm. I found that way they tend to be a little less afraid of you and more willing to come out into the open if you're calm, cool-headed, and don't show any kind of aggression. I've never carried a gun out in the bush. I've never needed to. If I see or hear or smell one that's even close by, I know I'm under a good protection. I don't have to worry about the wildlife. We have cougars, bears, wolves, grizzly. I know when I'm out there and they're out there, I'm under their basic protection. And that's a good thing. But I've learned a lot about them over the years. I learned some of why they do what they do, and some things that still makes me curious. Like some of the bending of wood that they leave, which are indications of food or places where they've set up structures. Usually it's to point towards a food source. As for snapping trees, I have no idea why they do that. I don't know if it's a sign of aggression or they're trying to point towards some larger thing. I have no idea. I've yet to learn everything about them. I'll never learn everything about them. I've had them try and communicate to me. I've tried to communicate to them. I've used hand signals, everything I can to try and communicate with them. They seem to understand some of what I'm saying. And I sort of kind of understand some little bit of what they're trying to say to me when they talk in their simian talk. It's awfully hard, but you can kind of figure out what they're trying to say if you look at what they're trying to do. Lots of times they'll try and bring food to you. They'll try and indicate where they want you to sleep. I found many, many, many nests of where they've slept, where they have been sleeping. Many of them out here in the forest. And it's an experience that I'll never forget. Ever since I was a kid, it's just something, once you've had the experiences of being around them, you never forget. It's it's kind of like doing the Jane Goodall thing, is learning as much as you can about them while you're around them. And even she believes that they're real, and which they are. And I've had, every time I go out in the forest, I have an encounter. Every time. Doesn't matter where I go. I find that once they get a hint that I'm in the area, they show up around my camp all the time. And usually not just by themselves, generally in family groups. So I kind of figure that I'm getting pretty well known through the Sasquatch groups, that I'm one to come around and not be afraid to come around or to show themselves. And I'll continue to have these experiences for very, very long time. As long as I'm able to get out into the forest, I'll always have an experience, because, like I said before, I've always encountered them every time I've gone out into the forest. And it's something that I will continue to do till the day I can't go out there anymore. And that's about all I have to say at this point. Thank you very much for listening to my experiences here on the island.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves and the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah, the sound of a memory brings me back to the bluegrass playing on my dad's 8-track. His pickup man had been through it, getting through the day on Scruggs and Skags, booking eight bales to those Tennessee jams. There's no other way that I'd do it. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards in double time, getting to the soul and the drumming on Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Pace of the city life drives me wild. The only tune is the cars rushing by, with the bass on the stereos booming. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards in double time, getting to the soul and the drumming on Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Something going backwards in double time, getting to the soul and the drumming on Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm, fried chicken, porch swing, mama's best sweet tea kind of sound.